Thank you so much for joining us for Spirit, the stimulating program initiative for retirees that inspires thought. I'm Judy Steinig, Director of Community Programs for the Orthodox Union, and it's my honor to coordinate and host this program. The OU created Spirit several years ago as an on-site program that took place in several different communities, and now we are very, very happy to bring it back as an online program for baby boomers, active retirees, not yet retirees, empty nesters, sandwich generation parents, and seniors, all of whom are looking for educational, physical, spiritual, and intellectual growth. Since we are all still sheltering in because of the pandemic, Spirit is the perfect way for all of us to engage in a virtual setting. Several weeks ago, we began to explore issues of dementia with Adina Segal, LCSW, who is a Jewish community outreach social worker with Caring Kind, which is New York City's leading expert in Alzheimer's and dementia care and provides local, holistic, comprehensive systems of support to Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers throughout the course of the disease. By popular demand, we are happy to welcome Adina back to the Spirit Forum to speak about some of the topics of dementia that we didn't have time to cover the last time. Thank you, Adina, so much for taking the time out to speak with us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn the program over to you now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Judy. It's really an honor to be here. I'm going to get my screen up, and I really want to thank the OU for giving a platform for talking about Alzheimer's and dementia. I think it is something that is unfortunately not spoken about a lot. I think a lot of people are suffering in silence, so I'm really glad to provide the information and the education. Hold on. Okay. So for today's agenda, this was based on feedback from people who joined our last session. I'm going to do a brief overview of what dementia is and what the stages are, discuss common challenging behaviors, explore different ways of handling some common ones. I want to talk a little bit about Holocaust survivors and what to consider for those who have dementia. And I also want to talk about self-care for the caregiver, because that is also an incredibly important and often overlooked topic. So when we're talking about dementia, we're talking about a group of symptoms that results from an underlying medical condition. So the actual condition is not dementia. Dementia is secondary. The most common one is Alzheimer's disease, which is what we all know. There are several others. There are many different types. There are about 120 different types of dementia. Some forms of dementia are reversible, which is why we often advise our clients to get a full neurological and medical workup, because we want to make sure that if it is reversible, there's something to do, or if there's anything to modify, there's something to do to reverse it. But for those who, have Alzheimer's or any of the other forms of dementia, it affects 4 areas of functioning. So the most common one that everybody knows about is the short-term memory, later the long-term memory, but it's more than memory. It has to do with cognition, your ability to think, plan, reason, use logical judgment and thinking. Behavior changes and personality changes are also very, very common. And because it is a medical condition, it also affects physical functioning. So it does affect motor skills, it affects gait, down to, in the later stages, the autonomic functions of the body, such as swallowing, breathing, things that are automatic that we don't even think about. So I'm going to talk more about Alzheimer's as the prototype, but realize there are other forms, and if you are caring for somebody or would like information about like Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, or vascular dementia, which are also quite common, you can kind of use it as a prototype. There might be some differences, but they're not particularly significant. The stages that it usually goes into is mild cognitive impairment, which is where there is some degree of memory loss, but it's not enough to affect the overall day-to-day functioning of a person. That's sort of a preclinical kind of dementia, or part of dementia. You're not quite there yet, but between 60 and 80% of people who are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment will go on to developing a full-blown form of dementia. And the way we classify it is you have the early stage, the middle stage, and the late stage. The early stage, a person, will have significant problems, but they can still pretty much live independently. The middle stage, they will need, increasingly more care. And in the late stage, that's the point where people really need care for almost all of their personal needs. So some common behaviors that I'm listing some common behaviors caregivers find challenging, and I broke it up by stage. I'm really basing it on calls and clients who I have worked with, but it's pretty much, there may be some overlap between the stages, but it pretty much looks a lot like this. In the early stages, the most common issue that comes up and what usually makes that drives families to start looking for help and for diagnosis is difficulties with money. A lot of times people who are in the beginning stages of dementia, they'll forget to pay bills, or they'll forget that they paid bills, or they will fall susceptible to scams. And there's a lot of difficulty in extricating them from those scams. And there are a lot of negative consequences to that. Mismanaged medication is another one. I get a lot of calls from people who are saying they don't know if their parents are taking their medications. They may take it at the wrong time. They may forget to take it. The pill box might become very difficult for them to manage. And that's another major concern. Personal hygiene is another big one. A lot of people with dementia have a lot of difficulty with showering and refuse to shower. Attend to personal hygiene, any sort of personal hygiene, changing clothing, things like that is also something that is fairly common. And eating, sometimes people will forget to eat. Or they'll forget that they ate, and they'll keep saying, they'll eat lunch, and then they'll go to their spouse and they'll say, "I'm hungry, what's for lunch?" And she'll be like, or they'll be like, "You just ate, what happened?" And so that can be another problem that it often comes, and you often see in the early stage. A lot of times that doesn't mean it goes away once somebody hits the middle stage, but this is usually when people realize at first that there's a problem. In the middle stage, there's more disorientation. You'll see wandering, concerns about a person getting lost in places that they have been to for forever. I had a case where somebody was walking to work in the same place that they've worked for 25 years, and they got lost. That's a very common thing. Another common experience is people will talk about wanting to go home. And many of them will try to wander home. That home may not be anywhere near, it may not exist anymore. It may not be anywhere near where they live right now. But they have this desire to go home, this feeling of going home, which I'll talk more in depth, but it's an unease. And a lot of times that will trigger a wandering episode where they will be going out, get lost, and the family tries to find them, and law enforcement gets involved, and it becomes a pretty intense experience. You'll also see what we call sundowning. And sundowning is kind of where at the middle to end of the day, a person will get really agitated. They might start hallucinating. They might start just getting really aggressive and violent, or just they may also not be able to sit still. They'll always be needing to do something or walk around or things like that. Hallucinations, both with sundowning and not with actually more often than not, it happens more in the evening, but it can happen during the day too. Can also happen at this stage. Paranoia, which also can happen in the early stage. This is a lot of times they'll be convinced that an aide is stealing from them, that a family member is stealing from them. That's another very common experience. As I mentioned, disorientation to time and place. They may think that they have to go to work, and they may get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, waking everybody up because they need to go to work, and trying to convince them otherwise becomes a futile task. Also, they may start having increasing difficulty recognizing family members. Sometimes they may have difficulty recognizing themselves in the mirror. And that's, I guess, more at the later point of the middle stage, but that's another common experience. And by the end stage, you really see that people here don't have a lot of ability to express themselves. They also really can't care for themselves adequately at all, and they're largely sedentary or bedbound. They may have difficulty eating. A lot of times, well, they will have difficulty eating. At this point, that's when swallowing gets affected. A lot of times there are discussions at this stage about feeding tubes. And the concerns that I find that family members have at this point is around their comfort. You know, the questions come up about, well, should we be giving them medications? Is it really helpful? How restrictive should we be on their diet? If they really like ice cream but they're diabetic and they're at this stage, this is the only pleasure they have, should we you know, just let them do it? These are our considerations that come up at this point. So I wanted to try to take a good lens at what the caregiver can do when it comes to this. And I think the first thing to do is you want the environment to work well for optimal caregiving. So the absolute number one thing that needs to happen, I know that there are a lot of different people representing different countries here and states and things, but I believe every jurisdiction has something related to powers of attorneys, healthcare proxies, and legal work. And the reason why being able to have a power of attorney or some legal paper basically giving you the right to take on a person's legal needs, financial needs, is important, because otherwise you really are going to be prevented from really arranging care according to what they want or what their wishes are. Same thing with the healthcare proxy. Their medical wishes may not be carried out the way they want them to be if you don't have one. So those are really, really important things. These are also really difficult conversations to have with people, but I think they're really essential, and they also will help prevent crises from coming down the line. You know, where if there is, God forbid, a hospitalization and the person needs to be discharged from the hospital and they, you know, need particular provisions regarding their home care or regarding nursing home care, it's a lot easier if you can show your healthcare proxy than if you don't have that. Especially, I would say, if you are not one of the people who are next of kin, either a spouse or a adult child. So in those cases, they're absolutely essential, but I would say they're essential for anybody. I would also add, this is not necessarily dementia related, they're really essential for anybody over the age of 21, because once the person hits majority, then parents can no longer make decisions, and unfortunately things can happen. Another piece I would want to mention is halachic living wills. You know, as Jews, we have considerations for end of life that we probably want to have according to halacha, and being able to use a halachic living will helps establish the fact that you are, you know, a Jew who wants to be treated, having your medical care designed in that way, and so it's a very important. It also is a very important document to have. On that end, I'd also like to just say, in general, having a rabbi to discuss your halachic concerns. A lot of halachic concerns may come up when it comes to taking care of somebody with dementia. I mean, Shabbos is often becomes an issue because, you know, especially as, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, just thinking about grandparents and relatives, is, you know, if you're in a building, can you use an elevator? Can the aide use the elevator? Dealing with kashrus issues with the aide, dealing with medical conditions and how to appropriately respond to, you know, what's the appropriate medical treatments that a person should be doing at various points in their life and in the disease. These are all important questions. So it is important to have a rabbi who understands your concerns, understands the issues, and so that also can relieve a lot of stress, or at least make it easier than if you're just left with question marks and sort of spinning all over the place. I would say, in terms of helping the person with dementia, you really want to prioritize their health and safety. And I'm going to get to this more with my Holocaust survivor discussion, but I think in general, it's not just for Holocaust survivors. You know, you want to make sure they're safe, but there are some things that it may not be the best way of doing things, but in terms of looking at things from the person with dementia's level of comfort, they may be, appropriate. If a person is not dressed the way they used to be, let's say you're used to somebody being dressed in more formal clothing, let's say they have, it's a lot easier given their dexterity issues to just use jogging pants. So use that. Let's say the person, another clothing example, doesn't want to get in pajamas and wants to sleep in their clothing. Nothing's going to really happen if they sleep in their clothing. It may not make you as a caregiver comfortable, but it is sort of a choosing your battles kind of thing. When it comes to health and safety, on the other hand, there are other that takes a whole different other considerations. So if it comes to using the stove or driving or things like that, those are things that really are much more important in trying to make sure that, the safe thing happens, as opposed to just what makes you comfortable as a caregiver and as you are used to experiencing that person. Another really important thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with difficult behavior or challenging behaviors with somebody with dementia is you want to think about their life story. A person, particularly because they're losing that judgment piece, that logic piece, and the ability to put themselves oriented in the here and now. I mean, they are in the here and now, but they have no context to themselves as an older person with dementia in the here and now. So a person who was a lawyer still may experience themselves as a lawyer. And so when you think about, if they're in an assisted living or a day program and they are sitting and doing arts and crafts, they may feel that's demeaning. It may not be the appropriate activity that they will be the most comfortable with. When I had another example is I had a case that I was working with where the person was an artist, and whenever he would sit down at a table, he would start smoothing the table over. Now, if you saw him and you didn't know he was an artist, you would just think it was some crazy behavior. If you knew he's an artist, well, when he's at a drawing table, that is what he does to the paper to be able to work. So you want to keep in mind those things, and those things that you don't quite understand, keep in the back of your mind what their story is and how that might put the pieces together in terms of why they're acting the way they're acting. I'll give you a great example. On my next bullet point, I'm saying enter Alzheimer's world. There's this really, it's actually, the website I think is being, redone, but there was a website called the Alzheimer's Reading Room. Now that he does have a YouTube channel, so you can check that out. But it's run by this man named Bob DeMarco, who was a caregiver for his mother. And she was, I think, 86 years old, and she started showing signs of dementia. He basically stopped everything. I'm not necessarily advocating this for all caregivers, but his story is that he was able to stop everything he was doing, and he moved down from New York to Florida to be with his mother. His mother really did not like that he was there. She really didn't see that she had a problem, and she really drove him crazy. She would say, I don't need you, go away, get out of here. Bob DeMarco's own words are that she was meaner than a junkyard dog. And so it was really difficult. And for 18 months, he was really struggling about what to do. He is this kind of out of the box thinker, and he would often just jot down his notes on a legal pad. And so one time he was doing that, and he wrote down, something has to change. And then he describes it almost like an epiphany, and he said, and that something is me. And then he decided he was going to try to enter his mother's world and really figure out what it was that she was doing. And he calls it Alzheimer's world. And I'll give you just one example. His mother would wake up in the morning, she'd go to the kitchen, and the first thing that would happen was she would open the freezer. And they had a fancy freezer that if you kept the freezer open for too long, it would start beeping. And so she would just stand there and look, and the freezer would be beeping, and he'd be saying, Mom, close the freezer. There's no reason for it. And she would go back and say, no, you don't know what you're talking about, go away, basically resisting every move. He started thinking about, well, what was my mom's life like when she was younger? She was a housewife, and probably the first thing she did in the morning was figure out what to defrost for dinner. So what he did was he took a donut. Now, or you could take, I guess, you could take anything. I guess she wasn't diabetic, but he would take a donut, put it in a baggie, put it in the freezer in the morning. When she would open the freezer, she would see the donut. She would take the donut. She would close the door and have it with her breakfast. So that's just to illustrate the importance of trying to figure out how a person's life story might be influencing their behavior. Another important piece I do think is really, really crucial for all caregivers is getting home care. Just in terms of both helping you get a break. Well, really, that's the main thing. You need a break. But sometimes we can't do everything. And having other people helping us is really, really important. I would say just in terms of practicality, there are private pay options, which of course are more expensive. They're also the easiest. I can talk a lot about New York and what's available here, but I can tell you that, in the United States, there is Medicaid, which does cover long-term care. Medicare does not. In other countries, home care is probably part of your nationalized health system. If anybody, and I would like to say, if anybody would like to find resources to help with that, you can definitely give me email me. We'll be sending that information to everybody. So if anybody would like some guidance, even if you're not in New York, I can get you to the right people who can provide you with that guidance. So sundowning. I wanted to just go a little bit in depth and do a deeper dive into some difficult behaviors. And I think sundowning is a really important one. It affects most people with dementia, where, by the middle to end of the day, people with dementia are pretty much spent. They're using all of their cognitive reserves, whatever they have, to be able to do stuff in the morning, and they're usually very tired. And so they can get very agitated. So usually somewhere between 2 and 5, a lot of people will report that the person that they're caring for gets agitated or aggressive or can't sit still, or just there's some sort of disruptive behavior. So they ask for ways of how to deal with this. So I would say whatever you can do to maintain a calm environment at this time of the day is really important. I'm a big fan of music, especially music that the person has always loved or that comes from their childhood. It can be very calming for them. Keeping, the lights, not quite low, because we don't want to, there may be some visual impairments, but, keeping things calm and not bright lights, I guess, is really important. Another thing to consider is having the person with dementia engage in something pleasurable and low key. So I have a case that I'm working with now. I have a couple of cases, actually, one of which the person with dementia really loves movies. And so we were thinking about, well, maybe you can get her engaged in a movie before she, gets to that point of agitation, and then she can kind of ride it out. So we decided we were going to try, maybe she loves The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is quite a long movie. So she was going to try that. I have another case where there's a parent is sundowning, and so what they have is the grandchildren are on a rotation where they call different days and they learn with the grandfather who has dementia. And these are things that kind of distract and try to get their mind off of whatever is getting them to feel that agitation. So that's another thing to think about, is what is low key and enjoyable that they can participate in. You want to do it before they get to that tipping point, but that they can sort of divert their attention away from whatever is distressing them. Another thing is, because sundowning has been shown to be related to disruptions in circadian rhythms. And as I mentioned, by the middle of the day, people with dementia get tired. Is if you see that they're feeling tired, encourage them to rest, even if it's to just sit in a recliner and take a little nap or something like that during the day. That can also really be helpful. So some other issues that often come up related to personal care So eating becomes an issue, as I mentioned. People either forget to eat or they eat too much. Another thing to consider is as people with dementia progress, they may forget the steps of how to eat. And what can help with that is having them eat with somebody. So have the aide eat lunch with them, or have family members eat lunch with them, or eat any meal with them, is helpful, because it will help them to see the cues to do without telling them what to do. Another concern is when it gets too difficult for them to maneuver with forks and knives or other cutlery, finger foods are really helpful. So sandwiches, or I don't know, pizza, or, well, pizza might be difficult, but cutting things up that you can actually maneuver with your hands instead of with a fork and knife is also something that can help with eating. Having favorite food around, so that you don't really have to do too much convincing when it comes to eating, is also helpful. And also using supplements if necessary. If the person really doesn't want to eat or really has lost their appetite, don't hesitate to use like a supplement like Ensure or Boost to help with getting the needed calories in. So about bathing is the other I find bane of caregivers' existence. And with bathing, there could be a lot of different reasons why a person with dementia won't want to bathe. Another thing we don't really think about with dementia that is true is that there are visual changes, and people with dementia see water different and experience the feeling of water differently than people who don't have it. So it can be really disorienting to them when they're in the shower or when they're feeling the water. They may not see the water. They may just find it a very confusing and uncomfortable experience. So what a lot of caregivers who I've worked with have said has been helpful is using a handheld shower head, which gives them the control over where the water is going. Another thing to consider is they may be unsteady on their feet, and they may be scared, rightfully so. I think a lot of older people, regardless of whether they have dementia, have this issue with going with showering and making sure that it's safe for them, given that they may have balance issues or other motor difficulties. So we want to make sure that the bathrooms have safety equipment, that it has grab bars. There might, a shower chair might be appropriate. And then this way they don't have to worry about falling in the shower. Also, this is another plug for home care, because it might be helpful for them to have somebody who can actually help them physically with the showering. Another thing you want to pay attention to is temperature and comfort. They may be experiencing the water as too hot or too cold, and that also might be why they don't, and they may experience, by the way, the bathroom itself might be too hot or too cold, and they may not want to undress because of temperature. They also may have discomfort for modesty reasons. They may not feel comfortable with whoever it is that's showering them, be it that maybe, if the aide is a woman, or if it's their child who's doing it, or things like that. We do want to keep that in mind as well, that they may have discomfort just in, why is this stranger telling me to take my clothing off? And then we can figure out the best way of handling that issue. I would also say to caregivers, don't be afraid to use assistive technology to help a person with dementia. When it comes to orienting yourself to time and place, or at least time, they make large clocks that also show you what day it is. Some of them will even tell you if it's morning, evening, or morning, noon, or evening, which will assist also with helping people be oriented to time, and they'll be able to look at it and see it as opposed to asking questions. Another thing to help with orientation is putting signs around the house, putting signs where your toothbrush is, putting, a lot of times people with dementia still can read, but they may get lost in their own home. They may not know where the bathroom is. They may not be able to find the kitchen. It can be helpful to have signs up just saying where everything is and what everything is. To prevent wandering, there are door alarms that will go off if somebody is opens the door. Another thing, and I've heard mixed things about this, but again, working with some of the visual changes in dementia, you have some people with dementia who, when they see a black mat, they think it's a hole. And so if that person, if a person you're caring for has that issue, putting a black mat in front of doors is another way to kind of discourage them from going out of the house, because they may perceive it as a whole. That is not with everyone. I wouldn't say only use that as a strategy, but I do know that is a strategy. They do use it in some assisted living dementia units. And I think the results are helpful for some, not helpful for everybody, but it's important to know about it as well. Another thing that you can do also to prevent a person from going into rooms that they shouldn't be going into, or opening doors they shouldn't, is putting stop signs up, and that also they might respond to that also. At Caring Kind, we actually partner with Medic Alert, and we have a bracelet. It's called our Wanderer Safety Program, and this is they'll have engraved. I don't even know. They may have the person's name, but they'll say that the person is memory impaired, and they'll have a tracking number on it with a number to call if they are found. And this can be very helpful because Medic Alert has a whole database. Emergency responders are able to check the minute they see someone and they have that bracelet. They can see, oh, this person is with Medic Alert. They'll look at the Medic Alert system, and they'll be able to put the bring the person back to their family and reunite them much quicker than if not. Unfortunately, we do hear stories about people who, they may have, in New York we have silver alerts. I think there are other systems like that in other places where if somebody is older and they go missing, there are these alerts that go out to agencies and to the public. If you see this person, to call a certain number. If they are found, it's not necessarily easy to identify who they are and to reunite them with their family if they're not in this system. So the system actually is pretty useful. There also are GPS products, which also can be very helpful with knowing, like, if a person is wandering where they are. Some people I know, if the person still carries a cell phone and keeps it with them, you can, and the phone is charged, you can have Find My Neighbor app, which I know some people use to keep tabs on where the person is. There are now GPS products you can put in the soles of a person's shoes. There's a lot of technology that you can use also. The only thing is you have to understand with the GPS stuff, and I'm talking about this as somebody who my phone often dies from lack of charging. A lot of these products have to be charged regularly, so you have to be on top of that. The bracelet, the benefit to the bracelet is that it's low tech, but for a lot of families, the high tech stuff is very helpful, and so they opt for using that as well. Smart home products are also something to look into. Now, almost you can hook almost every item in your house up to either like Alexa or Google Home or Echo, and that can be helpful with older adults, especially if they're living alone. I found especially for long distance caregivers, I have people who might be in another state who are checking up on their parents. They may have cameras. There are ways, through Alexa to, you can open and close their lights at certain intervals. You can turn the TV on and off. You can open and close the locks on their doors. And that can be helpful in cases where a person may need that some additional help, maybe either are resistant to home care or are not able to get home care for everything. So it's another thing to keep in mind and to look at. And technology and caregiving is becoming a larger interest, I would say, in the popular interest, and there are more products that come out every year. And with medications, there are also some smart medication dispensers that actually have packets for each time that the person takes medication. So for morning, noon, evening, you can rip these packets and get it perfectly dispensed. And all they need are medication reminders. There are also medication dispensers that beep when it's medication time, and it will keep beeping until the person, takes the medicine. So that's another thing to consider if that would work for you. I put on the bottom, many of these products can be found at the Alzheimer's store. A lot of these products can be, the Alzheimer's store, what's good about them is that they show it to you, they show you products based on the issue that it assists with. For a person with dementia, you can find a lot of these products on Amazon, but you do have to know what you're looking for. So it's worth looking at the Alzheimer's store to see. And then if you want a price to compare prices, you can do that. So I want to take some time to talk about special considerations for Holocaust survivors. I think before even going there, it is important to note that aging comes with a lot of losses in and of itself without a trauma history. You're talking about losses of friends, you're talking about losses of abilities that a person might have had, and that can, I mean, depending on the person, that can really be a personal trauma. When it comes to Holocaust survivors who have had to deal with so much and maintain an incredible amount of resilience in rebuilding their lives, it can be like even more of a threat because all of the abilities that they cultivated and everything that they did to survive can be gradually, going away, and that can be really frightening for them. So I think it is important to bear that in mind, that aging in itself can be experienced as traumatic, and for people who have had to really be in control and survive, it can be a really difficult thing to handle. Another thing to consider is that now that when people retire, they have a lot of unstructured time, and a lot of times intrusive traumatic memories can come in because there's nothing to distract. So you can actually see an uptick in PTSD symptoms, post-traumatic stress symptoms. And the loss of control piece, I think, is probably the biggest. Particularly when it comes to, say, getting a home care worker in, or maybe even the children taking over their money, or putting somebody in residential care. Residential care, I think, is really a topic in and of itself, because you are talking about a true loss of control where you're not in your home, there are all these rules, you're at the mercy of your carers, and that certainly will trigger a lot of feelings in who has already been in settings where they really lost all control and were really at the mercy of other people in, not positive ways. So, as I mentioned about going into Alzheimer's world, a lot of times people with dementia might show the same behaviors that I mentioned before. There might be different meaning. As I mentioned, resistance to care, it may be that they're experiencing this person not as a home health aide, but as, like a prison guard or a Nazi. So, that's something to keep in mind. You can see a lot of preoccupation with food, with having enough food, with eating enough or not eating, and hoarding. I mean, hoarding you'll also see, by the way, in people affected by the depression. That tends to be a response as well, but just keeping their belongings close to them so that nobody could take it. So as I mentioned about the resistance to home aides and long-term care facilities, and also both because of the dementia and because of the time, they may re-experience traumatic memories and have flashbacks and hallucinations. I know of a case of somebody who was really in fairly advanced dementia, but she was basically re-experiencing her times in the camps. And it was very clear to the family, and it was really awful because there was really no way that they could find to console her. She was on a lot of psychiatric medications, which were not working. But it was really difficult. And it's difficult for the children as well. I mean, you have to also understand, I think many of us have the experience where people, our family members have not shared what they really went through. And so you're kind of trying to put the pieces together, and then to see that and to see what their reactions were is I think really, it's a secondary trauma to the caregivers who I guess have become, I guess, more enlightened about what their parents went through. You can also, they may also show separation anxiety when family members are leaving. When you think about it, during their war experiences, if somebody left, they didn't know if they were going to see them again. And I mean, granted, all people with Alzheimer's who have this issue will still feel like they still may have that same separation anxiety, but it takes on a new meaning with somebody who is a survivor, because it brings up those past losses and those past experiences. You can also, they also may bring up murdered family members around holiday times or family celebrations. I was working with a case where somebody was telling me that they were getting married, and their grandmother, who didn't realize that they were the granddaughter and that she was the granddaughter and she was the Kala, comes over to her and she thinks she's her sister who was murdered in the war. And she says, "You're only coming here now? Where were you this whole time?" And this granddaughter, who understood where her grandmother was coming from, said, "Well, you know what? I'm here now. I'm sorry I wasn't around." And she was able to really respond with so much sensitivity. And I think that really illustrates the kind of work that we're called upon to do as caregivers, particularly of caregivers of people with dementia who are Holocaust survivors. So I have a list here of some common triggers that can come up with people with dementia who are Holocaust survivors. So bathing is a big one. Bathing was really triggering when it came to the camps. I think most of us know, you know, a lot of them were lined up. They were ordered to undress, and they never knew if they were actually going to be bathed or going to be killed. So that can definitely come up for people who are Holocaust survivors. Ambulance and police sirens, I think, are, you know, certainly a given and self-evident. Any sort of loud announcements or crying and screaming, particularly in like care settings, can be very triggering. Dogs are a big one. Uniforms, high black boots. I mean, some of these are pretty self-evident. Striped clothing. Foreign accents is another one. You know, a lot of times people were displaced from where they were originally from, and they were put in countries where people were speaking a different language. And so the fact that they were talking, and they would hear people speaking something different or from a different place could mean danger. So it's something to also keep in mind. Strong bathroom odors, unfortunately, when they, you know, in their experiences, they were not allowed the dignity of cleanliness. And so that any sort of bathroom odor can trigger that as well. So it's also something to think about, particularly when it comes to hospitals and making sure that people are changed on time. It's as caregivers, it's important to advocate for that. Haircuts, also self-evident. Doctors, I think that's also self-evident. If you were sick, you were in incredible danger of being killed. There were the medical experiments, all sorts of things. So those are another trigger. And nighttime. Nighttime was pretty scary and more dangerous times. So a lot of times you may see them being more triggered at night. So I want to, with all that, I really want to talk about what caregivers can do and then how you can care for yourself. As I mentioned, health and safety should come first. Everything else is optional. It's really important to figure a cost-benefit analysis of, is this for the person's health and safety, or is this just for my own comfort, or because it's just nicer, or it's better, or this is the way we've always done it. That kind of really needs to be reassessed. You want to do your best to assist the person with dementia in feeling safe. You want to point out safety cues about what in the room is keeping them safe, or if there's somebody there who's keeping them safe, somebody who they feel comfortable with if they're there. You want to emphasize safety. Sometimes, though, it may even be necessary to join them in whatever traumatic experience they're reliving in. And you know, if they're afraid that somebody is going to come in and you know, thinking that they're a guard or that they're somebody who's going to do them harm, it may be, you know, helpful to ask them, well, what do you think we can do to protect you? And you know, show them that you're taking them seriously, because you want to validate how they're feeling, and try to get them back to a point where they can feel safe. The other really important piece is do not force them to do things against their will, and try to figure out alternatives. So, I mean, a really classic example of this would be, say, with bathing. Firstly, older people don't have to bathe every day, so you can prioritize how often do you have to bathe them, and does it have to be a shower? Maybe if a shower is too triggering, you can look at sponge baths. There are waterless shampoos you can use, and trying to figure out alternatives and keeping them clean is something also to look at. So as caregivers, it is truly, I cannot leave until we talk about how to take care of yourselves as caregivers. You know, we all have been, if anybody has been on a plane, you know that they will tell you when, if in a case of an emergency, if you need an oxygen mask, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you put it on your child or other dependent. You can't help people without taking care of yourself. So I think what's really the most important thing is identifying what tasks you're comfortable doing and what tasks you are not comfortable doing. And I'm actually going to be sending out materials to help you with that. I was helping somebody once whose parent had a major stroke, and they were really overwhelmed in terms of what they had to do. And I gave them this tool that, again, I will send out. Basically, underlying the different tasks that have to be done for somebody who has any sort of medical issue, and what I can do, what I'm not comfortable doing, what I can't do, and you know, prompting you to figure out where can you get these needs met. And I think it was really helpful for that person, because they were able to say, you know what, this is really something I can manage. And I think being able to put down those tasks on paper and organizing them in that way is really helpful. Also asking for help, that's step 2. Trying to, you know, if there are other family members who can be involved. I know that's the whole other discussion. But you know, I have seen an incredible amount of family that does band together and does help and do help each other in capacities that they're able to. You know, who can help with, some people will take, like one family member maybe can't, you know, one child is not comfortable doing the, you know, day-to-day tasks, but they can handle the financial issues. Another one doesn't have a math head, but they're really good at helping with shopping and cleaning and being the parents, you know, direct support person. So, you know, that's helpful. Any friends, I mean, you do have people who will say, oh, if there's any way I can help. It may be helpful to make a list of the tasks that you need help with. And if somebody says, you know, if there's any way I can help you, and you can say to them, you know what, I do have things, would you be able to do? And then, you know, ask for a specific task. And again, hired help, I think, is really, really crucial, because they will help you to take a break. And I think even if it's a brief break, even if we're just talking about, you know, 2 to 4 hours, you know, 1 to 3 times a week, that's important time for you to be able to do things that you need to do. It could be for things that are, you know, fun. It could be, you know, I mean, the classic thing people talk about is, you know, getting a manicure. But or it could be even just like going to the doctor. Unfortunately, caregivers, it's been shown that a lot of times caregivers predecease the person who they're caring for, because they don't have the time to take care of their own health needs. If I had a dime for every time somebody said, you know, yeah, I'm caring for my mom and I haven't had a mammogram in 7 years because I just can't get there, I'd be pretty rich. It's a big problem. And it's really important to take that time to take care of yourself. Seeking out emotional support is really important. I can talk for this country. There are caregiver programs in every district of the US. Every county has caregiver programs which help with getting short-term respite, and have caregiver support groups, and have people who you can call to get support that you need. Again, if anybody is interested in finding out their local resources, I'm happy to put you, to direct you. Support groups can be really helpful. So I would highly recommend, not too many people know that there are these caregiver programs out there, but they are funded through, most of the time they're funded through the government, even in other countries. I know that they have as well. These are resources that are helpful and that we should use. So I highly recommend that. Another piece that I think, if there's anything else that you take from this conversation, is to be gentle with yourself. Anger and guilt are really, really common feelings. I think with the pandemic, I'm hearing from more and more people that it's more and more prevalent. Those are very common experiences. I guess it also circles back to the need to seek out emotional support with people who understand. So that's my little my talk. I thank you all. I want to talk a little bit about Care in Kind and what we offer. So we are an organization in New York City. We used to be the New York City chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. We have disbanded in 2016 in our own separate entity. But we really, I think, are a leader in the city in terms of support for caregivers of people with dementia. We have a helpline. And by the way, I mean, if you are looking for resources and you don't live in New York City and you need some direction, you can call our helpline and we will try to help you to find the available resources in your jurisdiction. We provide social work services for people where we can help with care planning. We can help with emotional support. We have support groups. Right now they're all on Zoom and on the phone, but God willing, they will be in person in our office in Manhattan eventually when it's safe. We do education and training. We have understanding dementia workshops. We have 5-week family caregiver trainings. We have 6-week trainings for people who are home care workers who want to know more about dementia care. And we actually have a website which can match you with people who have taken our training, who are privately paid. I mentioned our Wanderer Safety Program. We also have a program called Connect to Culture, which partners with New York City-based cultural organizations to provide programming for people with dementia. And we also have a day program for people with dementia, which is called Beginnings. So I really want to thank everybody for coming and for listening. And I will be sending some resources, which Judy will send out. And if anybody would like further support or are interested in any of our services, you are free to email me.
Adina, once again, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I think every one of us got lots of information, which we might be needing. It'll be back there. So, for some of us, it's relevant right now. So we really, really appreciate it. I want everyone to know that whether or not you heard Adina's first presentation, in yesterday's email, we gave you a link to it. And later on today or tomorrow, when I get this recording, I will be giving you both. So you don't have to ask for it. If you've registered, you're going to get both of the recordings. Plus, I'm going to also send out, Adina, I will send out the materials you gave us the last time, because that has your contact. We're going to send that out again. So everybody is going to get everything. And then you can watch this again on demand. If you came in late or want to see the materials, it'll be all there for you. Okay, so next week, actually, we're going to go in a little more in depth in some of the things that Adina said, because we are talking about both secular and halachic legal issues. We have Debbie Rosenfeld, who is an elder attorney, and she will certainly be talking about some of the things that Adina mentioned. And on Thursday, we have Rabbi Elchanan Zone, who's the director of NASC, the National Association of Chevra Kadisha, who will be speaking about the halachic issues that have to be addressed. So stay tuned for emails, for registrations. Again, of course, remember you have to register for every program separately. That's a Zoom policy now that keeps us all safe that the right people are going to be watching this. Okay, I want to remind you, if you received an email from SurveyMonkey, it is legitimate. We would appreciate if you would take a few minutes to fill it out. This feedback helps us to improve this program. It's very, very important. I want to thank everyone so far that's filled it out, but get us this information. We need to know the things that you're interested in, what you thought of other programs. So please fill that out. And as I had said earlier, All of our programs are recorded, and everybody who registers, whether you tune into the program live or whether you don't, whether you ask me or whether you don't ask me, everyone receives a link to the program following the program. So if you are interested in a session and you say, oh, I definitely can't make it, I have something else going on, a she or something else, just register. And then you will get the link later that day or the next day. So you don't have to ask. We appreciate all of our partnering synagogues who are helping us to spread the word about this program. If your shul is not listed, please reach out to your rabbi or president, because we need that authorization. I need to hear from somebody in authority that a shul wants to become a partner. There isn't any charge for doing it. All we ask is that the synagogue promote our program in the weekly email, and we give them all the information. I think that's about it for us for now. I want to wish everyone a good day. Have a good Shabbos. Be healthy and safe. And we look forward to seeing everybody again on Tuesday. Again, Adina, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.